And so the last group we're naming here are nitriles. So the interesting thing is we're going to go over the systematic name and the common way of naming nitriles. Okay, so for the systematic way, we name the alkane and then we follow with the word nitrile. Let me fill in the blank here. There's supposed to be a nitrile. Now the catch here is this is another example where this is going to be two words, okay? So let me put that in pink here. This is going to be two words. All right, so that's interesting. For the common way of naming, this is where we use the carboxylic acid name, okay? So the systematic way is actually, I think, easier because you're just saying the name as if it was a regular alkane, and then you're putting a space, and then you're following it with a new word, nitrile. Easy peasy, right? But for the common way of naming nitriles, more simple nitriles, we're going to base it off of the carboxylic acid name. Now, here's the catch. Do you remember when we went over carboxylic acid nomenclature? And there were two ways that I show you could do it. You could use the systematic or the IUPAC way, or you could use the common way. And the common way of naming a carboxylic acid was very similar to the common way of naming an aldehyde, where we only showed you a chart to name a carboxylic acid with 1 carbon in it, 2 carbons in it, 3 carbons in it, or 4 carbons in it. And that was for 1 carbon, you would use form as your prefix, and then you would follow with ic acid. So if you had a carboxylic acid and it had 1 carbon in it, it would be formic acid. If you had a carboxylic acid and it had 2 carbons in it, it would be acetic acid, right? 3 carbons in it, it would be propionic acid, okay? So when you are naming nitriles in the common way, you have to use the common way. Let me rephrase this. When you're naming nitriles the common way, we base that off of the common carboxylic acid nomenclature, okay? So for example, well, first let me tell you, you use the carboxylic acid, but you're going to use the common name, okay? So just remember that. You have to use the common carboxylic acid name, and we're going to drop the ic acid. So we're going to drop ic acid and replace with nitrile. Okay, so it's actually very similar to this up here. The other interesting thing is this is all one word. Okay, so that's interesting. Now we do want to note that if a nitrile group, and this is for both systematic or common naming really, if a nitrile group is a substituent, in other words, it's not part of the parent chain or it's not the highest priority, and therefore it's not what the parent is being named after, so for some reason it's a substituent, we call nitrile groups cyanogroups. Okay, and this is really when it's very similar to alcohols. So you know how when an alcohol functional group is on the parent and it's part of the parent, we have the parent name and then we finish with the 2 letters OL. So like, propanol, okay? But if an OH group, an alcohol group, is not the parent, then we call it a hydroxy group, and it's just a substituent. Same thing here. If the nitrile group is the highest priority, or it is the parent chain, right, then we call it a nitrile group. But if it's not the parent, it's not the highest priority or parent chain, then we just call it a cyanosubstituent. All right, so let's get to some examples here. So we have two examples. And for the first one, because it's very simple, we're going to name it the IUPAC way first, and then we'll come back and we'll name it the common way second. Now for the last one though, since it is pretty complex, we're not going to name it a common way. We're going to name it the IUPAC way. So for this first one, we've got 1, 2, 3 carbons. So remember, for the systematic way of naming, we name the alkane followed with a separate word, nitrile. So this is propane, and then a new word, nitrile. Okay, propane nitrile. Pretty easy, I think. For this one, what we're going to do is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here is our parent chain, and we have a methyl substituent. So this is, if we name our parent chain as if it's an alkane, it will be pentane. So that's our parent, right? And then we have a 4-methyl as a substituent. But remember, our parent chain, or our parent name, we need to follow it with the word nitrile. Okay? So this is 4-methyl pentane nitrile. Okay. Now let's look at the common name for this molecule here. We have 1, 2, 3 carbons. 3 carbons. Remember, for the common naming, we're going to use the carboxylic acid common name. Okay, so how would we name a carboxylic acid the common way when it has 3 carbons? Well, we would name it as propionic acid. Okay, so this is the common carboxylic acid name. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to drop the ic acid and replace with nitrile, and don't forget this time it's all one word. So let's drop the ic acid and we're going to replace with nitrile. So the final name for this as the common way would be propionitrile. So notice in this case, you're not going to have 2 N's next to each other. So I don't know the official rules why we get rid of 1 N, but I think it's because having 2 consonants next to each other, especially since they're the same letter, they don't want to do that. So in this case, we're actually only going to put in 1 N. So the N from the propion is going to be the same as the nitrile. So only put 1 N for there. But that's the only one that you will have that issue with, okay? So if this was a carboxylic acid with 1 carbon in it, it would be called formic acid, but we're going to drop the ic acid, so it would be what would it be? It would be, I have to spell it out, hold on. Formic acid would become formnitrile. See, that seems weird. Anyway, I don't really like the common way of naming. So I stick with the IUPAC way. And that is it. Those are the 4 carboxylic acid derivatives that we are going to talk about and how to name. The biggest thing for you to do is to practice, practice, practice. That way you get better at this.